5 with tuna.
No crust?
No crust.
The Fast and Furious franchise has grossed over $5 billion at the box office worldwide, putting it in the same league as movies like The Avengers, James Bond, and Star Wars. So how did a cheesy B-movie about stealing DVD players, which critics called a career-killing skid mark and the lame and laborious, capture the world's heart and become one of the biggest franchises of all time? Today on Wheelhouse, we're talking about one of my favorite movies ever, The Fast and the Furious. Looking at the success of the Fast and Furious series, it's wild that the first movie got greenlit in the first place. Director Rob Cohen got the idea for the Fast and the Furious after reading a magazine article. Ken Lee wrote a piece about the budding import tuner scene called Racer X. It detailed real-life street racers in Upper Manhattan. That article inspired Cohen to make the film, and Universal bought the rights to the story. If you've never watched the trailer for the Fast and the Furious, I highly recommend you do. There's no mention of a plot. You got Limp Bizkit, explosions, dirt bikes, sweet cars, and they spoiled the very end of the movie. It's the most 2001 thing I've ever seen. How do you not want to watch this? I've seen this movie maybe 15 times, and I'm stoked to watch it again right now.
Let's go for a little ride.
The Fast and the Furious opened on June 21st, 2001. To say its critical reception was lukewarm would be a compliment. Some reviews appreciated what it was, a guilty pleasure with high-stakes action. But other critics pointed out the wooden acting and called it fast food for the eyes.
Nice car. What's the retail on one of those?
More than you can afford, pal. Ferrari.
Look, I'll admit, no one was going to win an Oscar for this movie, but that didn't stop people from checking it out. One reason The Fast and the Furious was successful was timing. The only competition at the box office opening weekend was Dr. Dolittle 2, the one where the bear goes doo-doo in the potty. When given the choice between that and cars flying through the air, summer audiences came in droves to check out this car movie. The trailer didn't lie. People wanted fast cars doing sweet stunts, and they got it in spades. Letty Civic really did drive under that semi. They really wrecked Dom's Charger. They strapped the actor who played Vince to the side of a semi. Even though it was ridiculous, it somehow felt real and definitely felt intense. The Fast and the Furious netted over $140 million at the box office. Universal got the hint. People wanted more. The world The Fast and the Furious was released into was different than the one we live in now. It was 3 months before the September 11th attacks and nearly a decade before social media took over as the world's biggest news source. World events aside, the world of cars was way different back then as well, and The Fast and the Furious was about to change it. It was a movie for car people by people who knew almost nothing about cars. How could that work? Anybody watching would know that a computer blinking the words "danger to manifold" doesn't make sense, and neither does blowing the floor pan off a car. But car people didn't have anywhere else to go. Those mistakes have become what people love about this movie.
And Hector is gonna be running 3 Honda Civics with spoon engines.
So how did a movie riddled with errors and plot holes become the phenomenon it is today? It grew its own audience. Tuner culture, which revolved around modifying and racing Japanese compacts, was in its infancy in 2001. The only people involved in the tuner scene were the true believers, the people modding their own cars and usually racing them on the weekend, either at the track or on the street. So what does this have to do with The Fast and the Furious? One word: SEMA. And every year, they have a huge convention in Las Vegas called the SEMA Show. You might have heard of it. At the show, tons of aftermarket brands show off their new stuff and some of the best builds in the country. Not only is the aftermarket in attendance, but bigwigs from Detroit are there to scope out the trends and incorporate them into their own mainstream products. Once the movie came out and was a huge hit, popularity of Brian O'Connor-style Eclipse and Supra builds exploded, and people started bringing them to SEMA en masse. Those same industry bigwigs saw these cars at the show and thought, there might be something to letting people customize their car their way. This paved the way for brands like Scion, whose entire pitch to consumers was that they could build one how they wanted to. While white, black, and silver are the most popular paint options, more and more OEMs are offering bolder colors, in no small part thanks to the Fast and Furious series. Since the first Fast and Furious made so much money, Universal knew they couldn't not release a sequel. Too Fast, Too Furious came out 2 years later to even worse critical reception, but it still made over $236 million in ticket sales. Impressive, but nowhere near the $1.5 billion the current ones are raking in. Before the franchise could reach its full potential, it had to hit rock bottom, like when I got kicked out of Northern Arizona and had to go to community college. It's not really rock bottom. It was actually the best thing that ever happened to me, but this isn't in the script. This is real. Tokyo Drift had a budget of $85 million and none of the original cast. It bombed. In its opening weekend, Tokyo Drift didn't even cover its production budget, and its entire run grossed just over half of what Too Fast, Too Furious raked in. Moviegoers were telling Universal, no Walker and Diesel? No way these seats sell. Yeah, there's crazy cars in every movie, but as objectively bad as it was, there was something about the characters in the first one that people really connected with. Let's look at this scene from the first movie. Dom takes Brian back to his house to look at his 1970 Dodge Charger. The car belonged to Dom's dad, who passed away in a racing accident. Dom claims the car can run 9s at the drag strip. But when Brian asks Dom what he's run, Dom says,
I've never driven her.
Why not?
It scares the shit out of me.
Again, I know it's stupid, but I love it.
I live my life a quarter mile at a time. For those 10 seconds or less, I'm free.
Among all that mindless formula, there were actually really relatable, dare I say archetypal scenes throughout.
I don't know, it's something about engines that calms me down, you know?
After the Eclipse blows up, Brian's next car arrives on the bed of a truck, the shell of a Toyota Supra. It's not running, and it's difficult to see what it will become. The shell of a car, Brian's shell of a cop. He's becoming more vested in his new crew, and will be built up by them as he and Vin Diesel build up the Supra. Take this scene with the two in the empty engine bay. The two have room to create something real. For the car, it's an engine. For Walker, it's a friendship. Dare I say,
Family.
he is moving further from his identity as a cop, and with each element that is added to the Supra, he becomes more a part of Diesel's band. This is real stuff, people. Whether we want to admit it or not, people like the way Brian and Dom, or Letty and Dom, or Dom and this guy interacted. It's chemistry.
Streets closed, pizza boy. Find another way home.
So it's 2009, 3 years since Tokyo Drift laid an egg at the box office, and we found out they were making another one. I was 16, so I was pretty stoked, but other people were like, what? Even more surprisingly was that director Justin Lin was back, the guy who directed Tokyo Drift. But this time he knew what people wanted, and it wasn't just cars. Tokyo had cars. What it didn't have was Brian and Dom. Well, it had Dom, but not until the very end. You know what I mean. Lin would get the original gang back together, and hey, people might not have liked Tokyo Drift, but they really liked Han, so let's get him in there. And of course we'll bring back Letty and Mia. It was the franchise and the director's last shot. All or nothing. That sounds a lot like the races in the first one. Lin blew it out of the park. Fast and Furious made $363 million worldwide at the box office. The gang was back on, and they didn't stop adding to the formula. They made another one, Fast 5, where Ludacris and Tyrese were back. I don't even remember what they did in the second movie, but fans loved them.
Ejectocito, cut!
And oh yeah, what if we add the biggest action star in the world to the mix? The Rock came on as a bad guy, and we loved it. Oh, guess what? For the next movie, how about we get, I don't know, Jason Statham at the end. From the fourth movie on, the series made more and more money with each installment. Fast 5 doubled the box office with over $600 million. Then Furious 7 made $1.5 billion. Then The Fate of the Furious broke $1 billion again. By the time the latest installment came out, the cast had 2 Oscar-winning actresses, and Helen Mirren asked to be in the movie. And who can forget all the cars along the way? The Eclipse, the Supra, all of Dom's Chargers, Brian's Silver R34, the Veilside RX-7, the RB26 powered Mustang, the Buick GNX, the Rock's Gurkha F5, the Ramp Car, the Ford Escort, the skydiving WRX, Dom's Ice Charger, the list goes on. And the stunts, going under the semi, jumping over the train tracks, jumping a Yenko Camaro onto the yacht, all of the real drifting in Tokyo Drift. The tanker heist, the vault heist, driving out of an airplane. Every movie raising the stakes higher than the last. So how did The Fast and the Furious go from some weird cult classic about Mitsubishis and Toyotas to worldwide appeal and box office records? It grew its own audience and continued to feed them more and more of what they wanted. It's not only its own franchise, but it's effectively its own genre. These movies give the fans what they want over and over and over again. And I am truly not ashamed to say that I love them. Thanks for watching this episode of Wheelhouse. I really do love Fast and Furious. There's like 1,000 cars in the Fast and Furious movies, but I want to know what your favorite is in the comments. Let me know. I'll be down there with you. Be nice. See you next week.